name is Paige Holloway. I'm 31 years old. 8 months ago, my husband went missing after a Category 4 hurricane swept through the coast of Louisiana. 6 weeks after that, the county coroner's office told me they had recovered enough to make a formal determination. Missing. Presumed dead. Those were the exact words on the paper they handed me. I still have that paper. I keep it in the drawer of my nightstand because I never fully believed what it said. The hurricane hit on a Thursday. My husband had stayed behind in our house in Homa while I evacuated early with our 7-year-old daughter, Chloe. He was supposed to leave the next morning. He had a plan. He always had a plan. He was going to board up the last 2 windows, load the dog into the truck, and drive north to meet us at my mother's house in Baton Rouge by noon. That was the plan. He never arrived. The storm knocked out cell towers across the entire parish. For the first 2 days, I told myself that was why I couldn't reach him. Bad signal. Downed lines. I kept calling anyway. 40, 50 times a day I called. His phone rang twice and went to voicemail. Then it stopped ringing altogether. By the 3rd day, I started calling the emergency shelters. By the 4th day, I was calling hospitals. By the 5th day, I was standing at a National Guard checkpoint on the highway, begging the young soldier in full gear to let me drive back into the flood zone to look for him myself. He looked at me with this expression I'll never forget, not unkind, just exhausted and sorry. "Ma'am," he said quietly, "the water is still 8 feet high in most of that area. There's nothing you can do right now that we aren't already doing." I drove back to my mother's house and sat in the driveway for 20 minutes before I could make myself go inside where Chloe was waiting. His name was Owen Holloway. He was 34 years old. He'd been a firefighter with the Terrebonne Parish Fire Department for 9 years. He was the kind of man who fixed things without being asked. The leaking faucet in our kitchen, the neighbor's fence after a storm, anything that needed doing. He was also the kind of man who made pancakes shaped like dinosaurs on Saturday mornings because Chloe had asked him to do it exactly once, 3 years ago, and he just kept doing it every single week because she laughed every single time. Weeks passed. The water receded. Search and recovery teams went through our neighborhood. They found the truck, still in the driveway, half submerged. They found the dog. They found a lot of things I wish they hadn't found. And they didn't find what I needed most, which was Owen, alive. What they did eventually find in a section of the bayou 2 miles from our house were items identified as belonging to him. His wallet, his wedding ring, his department-issue watch with his name engraved on the back. The coroner's office filed their report. The insurance company sent letters. People at church started bringing casseroles. My mother and my sister drove down to help me sort through paperwork. My sister sat with me at the kitchen table for 3 days straight, going through FEMA claims and insurance documents and legal notices while I mostly stared at the walls. At some point, I signed things. I don't remember all of what I signed. I remember my hand shaking. 8 months. That's how long it had been by the time I got the phone call that changed everything. Chloe and I had moved into a small rental house in Baton Rouge by then. I was back at my job as a dental hygienist, working 4 days a week. We had started something like a routine. We ate dinner together every evening. I helped Chloe with homework. I read to her before bed, the same chapter books Owen used to read to her, because she asked me to keep going even though we were both crying by the 2nd page the first time I tried. We were surviving. That's the only word I had for it. Not living, not okay, just surviving. On a Tuesday evening in March, I was in the kitchen washing dishes when my phone buzzed on the counter. It was my sister calling. She lives about 20 minutes away in Prairieville, and we talked most days, so I almost didn't even look at the screen before I answered. But something made me look. Her name was flashing on the screen, and I had a strange feeling before I even picked up. Just a tightness in my chest, the kind you can't explain. "Hey," I said. There was a pause. Not a normal pause. A long one. Paige. Her voice sounded different. She sounded the way she had the morning after the hurricane when she was trying to figure out how to tell me. Owen still hadn't checked in. Like she was carrying something heavy and didn't know how to put it down. "What's wrong?" I asked. Are you sitting down? She said. I wasn't. I was standing at the sink with wet hands and a dish towel, and I felt my stomach drop all the way to the floor. Just tell me, I said. Another pause. I could hear her breathing. Paige, I need you to come over here. I need you to see something in person. I can't explain it on the phone. My mind went immediately to Chloe, who was in her bedroom, and to my mother, and to everyone I loved and the thousand ways something terrible could happen. My sister? I said. You need to tell me right now if someone is hurt. No, she said quickly. Everyone is okay, I promise. But you need to come. Please. Tonight. I dried my hands. I asked my neighbor to sit with Chloe for an hour. I got in my car. The whole drive to Prairieville, I kept telling myself it was nothing. Maybe she found something of Owen's that had turned up in a recovery effort. Maybe she wanted to show me photos from when we were kids, something sentimental. I went through a dozen explanations in my head and none of them stuck. There was something in her voice I couldn't shake. She didn't sound sad. She sounded shaken. Those are two different things. When I pulled into her driveway, she was standing on the front porch with the door open behind her and her arms crossed over her chest. The porch light was on and she looked pale. She came down the steps before I even had the car in park. I got out and she grabbed both of my hands. Okay, she said, I need you to stay calm. Whatever you're feeling right now, I need you to just breathe and stay calm. You are terrifying me, I said. She walked me inside without letting go of my hands. We sat down together on her couch, and she picked up her laptop from the coffee table. Her hands were shaking slightly as she turned the screen toward me. There's a Veterans Recovery Center in Shreveport, she said carefully. They posted something this afternoon on their Facebook page. She took a breath. Just look. I looked at the screen. It was a photograph of a man sitting in a chair by a window. The photo was slightly grainy, taken indoors in low light. The man in the photo had a beard, much fuller than I was used to. He was thinner, noticeably thinner, with his left arm in some kind of brace. He was looking out the window and his face was turned slightly away from the camera. But I knew that jaw. I knew the slope of those shoulders. I knew the way he held his left hand, curled slightly inward at the wrist, the same way he always held it ever since he broke two fingers in a training accident years ago, and they healed just slightly wrong. My entire body went still. That's Owen, I whispered. My sister didn't say anything, she just watched me. I leaned closer to the screen. The caption under the photo said the facility was helping a man recover from severe injuries sustained during the hurricane season. It said he had been found near a collapsed structure along a flooded roadway by a volunteer rescue team and brought to a hospital where he had remained unconscious for several weeks. It said he was now stable. It said they were hoping someone might recognize him because despite months of recovery, he had not been able to provide them with any consistent identifying information about himself. My hands were shaking now, too. He's been there, I said. 8 months. He's been there this whole time. My sister put her arm around me. She said she had already sent a message to the facility through their Facebook page 20 minutes ago before she called me. No response yet. I grabbed my phone and called the number listed on their website. It rang 5 times and went to a general voicemail for the center's administrative office. I left a message that came out barely coherent. I said my name 3 times because I kept losing my place. I said I believed the man in the photo was my husband, Owen Holloway, missing since August, firefighter, to Reverend Parrish. I gave my phone number twice. Then I sat there on my sister's couch and couldn't move. What if it's really him? I kept thinking. What if it's really him and he's been less than 5 hours away this whole time while I was signing insurance papers and telling our daughter that Daddy wasn't coming home and trying to remember how to breathe every single morning? We have to go there, I said. My sister nodded. First thing tomorrow, she said. I'll drive. I didn't sleep that night. I lay in the dark in my sister's guest room because she wouldn't let me drive home, and I stared at the ceiling and thought about Owen. I thought about the first time I saw him at a mutual friend's crawfish boil in Homa when I was 24 and he was 27, and he had a terrible sunburn on the back of his neck, and he was laughing at something someone had said. I thought about our wedding in the backyard of his parents' house. I thought about the way he looked the morning Chloe was born, standing beside my hospital bed with this expression of total helpless amazement, like he couldn't believe something that incredible was real. I thought about the last thing he texted me before the storm hit. Boarding up the last window now. Dog is already mad at me for the carrier. I love you both. See you tomorrow. I had read that text message approximately 400 times in the past 8 months. At 6 in the morning, I called my mother and asked her to pick up Chloe from school if I wasn't back by 3. I didn't tell her why. I didn't know how to explain something I still couldn't entirely let myself believe. My sister and I left at 6:30. It was a 4-hour drive north. She made coffee in a travel mug for each of us, and we drove mostly in silence through the dark, flat highways of the state, the sky going from black to gray to pale orange as the sun came up over the fields. My phone rang at 7:42, an unknown number with a Shreveport area code. I answered on the first ring. A woman introduced herself as the patient care coordinator at the facility. She said she'd received my voicemail and seen my sister's message on Facebook. She said she wanted to speak with me carefully before I made any decisions about coming in. I'm already on the highway, I said. I'm 4 hours away. A brief pause. Then she said, I understand. I just want to prepare you for what you may find when you arrive. She explained that the man they had been caring for had sustained a significant traumatic brain injury during the storm. He had been found with severe head trauma, multiple fractures, and hypothermia. He had been unconscious for nearly 3 weeks following his rescue. When he regained consciousness, he was unable to recall his name, his address, or any details about his life before the storm. He had been cooperative and calm throughout his recovery. He was physically much stronger now, but his long-term memory, she said carefully, remained largely inaccessible to him. I held the phone very tightly. He doesn't know who he is? I asked. He knows very little, she said. He's aware he doesn't remember. He's been patient about it. But I want you to be prepared for the possibility that he may not recognize you when you arrive. I stared out the windshield at the highway ahead of us. Okay, I said. I'm still coming. She said she would have someone meet us at the entrance. I put the phone down in my lap and looked at my sister. She had heard enough of the conversation to understand. She reached over without taking her eyes off the road and put her hand over mine. We'll figure it out, she said. Whatever it is, we'll figure it out. The facility was a low brick building set back from the road in a quiet part of Shreveport, surrounded by a few large oak trees that had gone gold in the early spring. It looked calm. It looked like a place where people were being taken care of. I held on to that thought as we pulled into the parking lot. The patient care coordinator met us at the front entrance exactly as she had promised. She was a woman in her 50s with kind eyes and a measured way of speaking that I found steadying. She walked us inside and sat us down in a small family meeting room before we went any further. She went over everything again. The circumstances of his rescue, the extent of his injuries, the nature of his memory loss. She said he had given himself a name during his time there, just a name he felt comfortable going by while he waited for his past to come back to him. They had been calling him that for months. She said I should be prepared for the fact that he might feel like a stranger to me in some ways, even if I recognized him immediately. I heard everything she said. I was also barely able to sit still in my chair. Finally, she stood up and said, "Are you ready?" We followed her down a hallway and through a door that led outside to a small courtyard. It was enclosed with a few benches and some raised garden beds that had been planted with winter herbs. The morning light was still soft. There was a man sitting on the far bench with his back partially toward us, looking out at the garden. The coordinator said his name quietly, the temporary name they had given him, and he turned around. The moment I saw his face, I stopped walking. It was Owen. 8 months of not knowing, and it was Owen, right there, 12 feet away from me on a wooden bench in Shreveport, Louisiana. He was thinner. The beard changed his face. There was a long scar along his hairline that I had to look away from because I wasn't ready to think about what had made it. But it was him. It was completely and entirely him, and I felt like the ground was tilting beneath my feet. "Owen," I said. My voice came out barely above a whisper. He looked at me with a neutral, careful expression. Not unkind, not afraid, just careful. The expression of someone who has learned to be patient with things they cannot explain. He said, "Hello." Just that. "Hello." I walked toward him and I sat down on the bench beside him because my legs weren't going to hold me up much longer. I was trying very hard not to cry because the coordinator had told me that emotional displays sometimes caused him anxiety. I was pressing my fingernails into my palm to keep it together. "Do you know me?" I asked. I couldn't help it. I had to ask. He looked at me for a long moment. Something moved across his face, a flicker of something uncertain. "I don't think so," he said slowly. "But you look like someone I've been trying to remember." I had to press both hands flat against my knees. "Your name is Owen," I said. "Owen James Holloway. You're 34 years old. You're a firefighter from Homa. You have a daughter named Chloe. She's 7. She likes dinosaurs and chapter books. And she is waiting for me to come home and tell her that her dad is alive." He was very still. He was watching my face with that careful, patient expression, and somewhere underneath it there was something else. Something working. "I don't remember any of that," he said quietly. "I'm sorry. I want to. I can tell that I should." "I know," I said. "I know you don't. That's okay. We have time." The days that followed were the strangest of my life. Stranger in some ways than the days after the hurricane, because at least then the grief was something I understood. This was something I had no template for. The medical team explained that Owen's type of memory loss, post-traumatic dissociative amnesia combined with the effects of the TBI, was not uncommon in severe trauma cases. They said the brain protects itself. They said memory can return. Sometimes quickly, sometimes gradually, sometimes triggered by something unexpected. They said there were no guarantees. They also said the most helpful thing was familiar people, familiar places, familiar sensory experiences, things the brain recognized even when the conscious mind couldn't access them. So I started visiting every day. I drove 4 hours each way, 3 days a week, and on the other days I called. My mother took Chloe to school. My sister covered other things. I sat with Owen in that courtyard and I talked. I told him stories about our life the way you would tell stories to someone who had never heard them, because that was exactly what he was. I told him how we met. I told him about our first date, miniature golf in Homa, and we both played terribly and laughed the entire time. I told him about the drives we used to take on Sunday mornings, no destination, just coffee and the radio and the flat Louisiana roads going wherever they went. He listened. He was always attentive, always kind, but his eyes stayed the eyes of a polite stranger. I showed him photos on my phone, our wedding, Chloe as a newborn, Chloe at 2 and 4 and 6, the house in Homa before the storm, his fire station, the guys from his crew. He would look at each photo carefully. Sometimes he would say something like, "I can see why I would have loved that." And those words were both a comfort and a quiet heartbreak all at once. 2 months into my visits, I brought Chloe. I had been uncertain about it. I didn't want to confuse her. She was 7, and she had spent 8 months being told that her daddy was gone, and now I was trying to explain to her that actually he was alive, but he didn't remember her. That was not a conversation that came with the parenting guidebook. I did my best. I told her the truth in the simplest words I had. I told her that Daddy's brain had gotten hurt in the storm and had forgotten some things, the way you forget a dream when you wake up, except much bigger. I told her that his heart hadn't forgotten, even if his brain had. I told her that he was still him, even if he didn't know it yet. She thought about this for a long time with the seriousness that 7-year-olds bring to things that actually matter. "Will it help if I go see him?" she asked. "I think it might," I said. "Then I want to go," she said. I held her hand the entire drive to Shreveport. Owen was in the courtyard when we arrived, the same bench where I always found him in the mornings. He looked up when we walked through the door. His eyes went to Chloe immediately. Something happened in his face. I couldn't name it exactly. Not recognition, not quite, but not nothing either. Chloe stopped a few feet away from him. She looked at him with those serious dark eyes she got from Owen's side of the family, and she said, very quietly, "Hi, Daddy." He looked at her for a long moment. "Hi," he said. His voice was different than I had heard it in weeks, softer. She walked up to him and, without any hesitation, she climbed onto the bench beside him and leaned her head against his arm exactly the way she had always done since she was old enough to sit up on her own. He looked down at her. His hand came up, slowly, and rested on the top of her head. I stayed very still by the door because I was about to fall apart entirely. "What's your name?" he asked her. "Chloe," she said. "That's a good name," he said. "You used to say it was the best name," she said matter-of-factly. "You said you picked it." He looked down at her for another long moment. His hand stayed on her hair. "I think I probably did," he said. That evening, the coordinator called me in for a brief check-in while Chloe had a snack in the family lounge. She said Owen had been quieter than usual after our visit. She said that wasn't necessarily a bad sign. She said sometimes the brain needs time to process what the heart already knows. 3 weeks after that first visit with Chloe, I was sitting alone with Owen in the courtyard on a Saturday afternoon. Chloe was at her grandmother's. It was a warm April day, the kind of day that feels gentle after a long winter. I had run out of stories to tell, at least the ones I had been planning, so I just sat with him in the quiet, and after a while I started humming. I don't even know why. It was just a thing that happened. It was a song they had played on the radio during one of our Sunday drives years ago, a song neither of us had known the name of, and we had both started singing along anyway, making up some of the words we didn't know. It had become a joke between us, a small private joke that meant nothing to anyone else in the world. I hummed the first few bars. Owen went very still. I kept humming slowly because I wasn't sure what was happening and I didn't want to stop. He turned his head toward me. His expression was different. The careful, patient look that had been there for 2 months was gone. In its place was something I hadn't seen since the morning before the hurricane, when he kissed me goodbye in our kitchen and told me he'd see me tomorrow. He looked like Owen. I stopped humming. He said my name. He said, "Paige." Not a question, not uncertain. Just my name, said in a voice I had been hearing in my dreams for 8 months. I couldn't speak. I pressed both hands over my mouth. He looked at me like a man waking up from a very long sleep, and I could see on his face the exact moment it started coming back to him. His eyes filled with tears. His jaw tightened the way it always did when he was trying not to cry. And here I finally managed to say, "I'm right here." He reached over and took my hand. His grip was the same. That was the thing that broke me completely, that his grip was exactly the same. "The dinosaur pancakes," he said suddenly. His voice was rough. "Chloe, she laughs every time." I burst into tears. He pulled me toward him and I leaned against his shoulder and we both just fell apart right there on that bench in that courtyard with the April light coming through the oak trees. Not the quiet tears of politeness or grief, the kind of crying that happens when something you had given up forever comes back to you. He remembered more over the following days. Not everything at once, and not without gaps. And the medical team was careful to remind me that recovery from this kind of injury was not linear. There would be good days and harder days. There would be things that came back clearly and things that remained blurred for a long time. But he remembered me. He remembered Chloe. He remembered the house in Homa and his crew at the fire station, and his parents and the crawfish boil where we met, and the song on the radio we never knew the name of. The day he finally came home, we drove down from Shreveport in the morning. Chloe sat in the back seat and talked the entire way, filling him in on 8 months of school and her best friend and the chapter books I had been reading to her and the way she had started drawing dinosaurs herself because she missed the pancakes. He sat in the passenger seat and listened and asked questions, and by the time we crossed back into Terrebonne Parish, he was laughing, a real laugh. the one I had been missing, and I had to focus very hard on the road ahead so I didn't completely lose it while driving. We had lost so much. Our house was still being rebuilt. Owen had months of continued therapy ahead of him. There were hard conversations coming about everything the storm had taken, about the year of living in its aftermath, about the long road that was still in front of us. But we were driving south together in the morning light, and Chloe was in the back seat telling her father about dinosaurs. And Owen reached over without looking and put his hand over mine on the gear shift, the same way he had on 10,000 drives before. That was enough. That was more than enough. That was everything. There's a moment near the end of this that I still think about. Owen sitting on that bench in the courtyard, and me humming a song we used to sing in the car, a song with no name, a song that belonged only to us. And the way something shifted in his face before his mind could even catch up to what was happening. He said my name before he could explain why. His heart knew me before his memory did. I don't think that's a small thing. I think that's everything. When the hurricane took Owen, I didn't just lose my husband. I lost my sense of what was solid. The ground I had been standing on turned out to be something I'd never thought to question until it was gone. And in the months that followed, I had to make a choice that I didn't fully understand I was making at the time. I could wait for the pain to tell me what to do, or I could decide, deliberately, to keep going anyway. Not because I was sure of anything, but because Chloe needed dinner and her homework checked and someone to read to her before bed. Because showing up, even when showing up felt like dragging yourself through concrete, was the only thing I actually had control over. That's the thing nobody tells you about the hardest seasons of your life. Strength doesn't feel like strength when you're in it. It just feels like getting through Tuesday. It just feels like making the drive, making the call, sitting on a bench, and telling your story to someone who looks at you like a stranger. I drove 4 hours each way, 3 times a week, for 2 months, with no guarantee that any of it was working. No guarantee that Owen would ever come back to himself. I kept going because I had thought through the alternative and I couldn't live with it. That's not heroism. That's just what you do when you decided that love is a verb and not just a feeling. And Chloe, I think about what it asked of her. To walk into that courtyard and say hi to a man who was her father in every physical sense and a stranger in every other. She was 7 years old. She climbed up on that bench and leaned against his arm like it was the most natural thing in the world, because to her it was. She wasn't performing courage. She just loved him. Simply and without conditions, the way children do before the world teaches them to hedge their bets. There's something worth sitting with than that. The clearest thinking I did during those 8 months wasn't strategic. It was moral. It was asking myself what kind of person I wanted to be when this was over, regardless of how it ended. Did I want to be someone who stopped? Someone who let fear make the decision? I already knew the answer. Acting on it was the hard part. Owen's memory didn't come back because I was patient in some passive, waiting sense. It came back because I stayed. Because I kept bringing him pieces of our life and trusting that something in him was still listening even when nothing visible was happening. That's not magical thinking. That's understanding that the work you put in, quietly and without applause, accumulates. It goes somewhere even when you can't see it. The song reached him before the words did. The love landed before the logic did. I'm not the same person I was before the storm. I don't think I was supposed to be. What I am is someone who found out what she was made of in the worst possible way and came out the other side still standing, still driving south on a Tuesday morning, still listening to her daughter talk about dinosaurs in the back seat while her husband's hand rests on hers on the gear shift. That's the life we built back, and it turns out it's the same one we always had. Just held a little tighter now.